Have you ever asked the question about a loved one or friend, why did God let them die? And I think of situations like a mother that has several children and she suddenly passes away with a heart problem or blood clots, or in many instances cancer, and she's left those children there without a mother. Perhaps the father is in their life, but it's sad for the children. And then I think of situations about women that have infants that they are just love and adore, and they have what's called a crib death, and there's certain medical terms for that, very unexpected. And then I think about during the recent situation with the virus, how many ministers in entire denominations, one denomination lost 700, well over 700, I don't know the exact numbers, over 700 ministers with COVID. And there are many times that you have to ask yourself, and I don't think it's wrong to question the why the Lord let it happen, although you may not get an answer in this life as to why. But I don't think it's wrong to ask that. I mean, it's very easy for someone who did not lose that loved one to say, well, you just need to trust God. But when you've lost the loved one that you depended on, you just begin to say to yourself, this really doesn't make sense, because in many of the full gospel circles, they believe in the atoning work of Jesus and they believe in healing. And so they pray for these individuals, and yet it seems that that particular prayer was not answered in the way that they prayed it. And this is an issue that a lot of ministers don't really want to touch or talk about, but if you've ever kept up with our ministry for 46 years in our YouTube channel, we discuss a lot of times issues that are a little bit on the edge, a little bit controversial at times. And I appreciate those of you that take the time to listen to our reasoning. First of all, when we ask, why God did you allow someone to die, I'm going to tell a story of a dear friend of mine. His name is Pastor Walter Hallam, and he pastors in Lamarck, Texas. And if you live within an hour of Lamarck, Texas, and you can drive to his church there in Lamarck, I would suggest you doing it. He is one of the greatest pastoral revelators of the Bible that I know. I know of three that are outstanding. He is in the top three, and that's saying something, knowing thousands of ministers. Now, many years ago, and I'll make the story brief, but his daughter and several of the staff members were flying back from a meeting back home. And there was an accident and the plane crashed. And if I recall, there was about 4 people that were killed in the plane crash. It may have been 5, but there was at least 4, and I think 2 survived. And I'm trying to tell that part from memory, and I hope I'm correct in the number there. But Walter's daughter was killed in that accident. And it's real interesting. From what I was told, there was a young man sitting across from her who survived the accident. So if she had sat in that seat, she would have survived, and the young man's life would have probably been taken. I think the young man is now a minister of the gospel. Well, needless to say, this was about a 17-year-old daughter that had a great gift and an ability to speak to people. And when you have someone of that age in your family, you see the future. You look at the future of what God can do through them and how the Lord can use them. And now she's in heaven with the Lord. Walter wrote a book, and if you can contact the church there in Lamarck, Texas, and order the book from him, but he talked about the why. The why, kind of like, why do bad things seem to happen to a lot of good people? And it's one of the greatest books you'll ever read. And I'm putting a plug in for that because it's phenomenal. Walter Hallam there in Lamarck, Texas. The Lord spoke to him, and I will let him, you can get a hold of him or his material and teaching on this where you can get the details. The Lord spoke to him and told him about how that he lost. Jesus appeared to him many weeks after the crash, and told him that there were things that were not just. He said, when they slaughtered John the Baptist and beheaded him, he was a righteous man, that was not just. When they stoned Stephen, the first martyr of the early church, he was a good man simply preaching. They killed him, that was not just. So there are things in life that will happen that just do not seem like they are just things. They are the right things, but they happen anyway. Then the Lord took him to the scriptures, and I'll be brief here because I want to make the main point here in a moment, of 4 reasons why people die. And we're talking about they die in that they don't fulfill the 70 to 80 years that's mentioned in the book of Psalms. Ecclesiastes said, why should you die before the time? It is appointed unto a person once to die, and after this the judgment. So the this is what Jesus told him. He said, first of all, there was a woman with the spirit of infirmity, and it was caused by a demon. Number one, demons cause sickness that at times can take a person's life. Number two, God gave him the story about people building the Tower of Siloam and how the tower fell and killed 18 people. And Jesus said, were these unrighteous? Is that why they died? Are you saying that the judgment came, this was a judgment? He was kind of correcting the false belief of his day that if something bad happened, it was because you sinned. And if all good happened to you, it must be because you're super righteous. He was correcting that error. Now, when God showed him the tower falling, he said this, some people do not do their job right. And when they built the building, there was an error that caused the tower to fall and kill the people. This can happen with planes. If people do not, pilots a lot of times have crashes and in the smaller planes because they're running out of fuel and they think they can make it to the runway and they don't. A lot of times, if you see a plane that's gone down, they'll say it had engine trouble, and it may have had engine trouble or it may have run out of fuel. And most pilots don't want you to know they ran out of fuel, and many have survived those and some have not. So if a person does not do their job right, if they put on a bad tire on the car and you crash the car, there's 100 examples you can give. It can cause someone's life to be taken because someone did not do their job right. Third reason was he went to the beheading of John, which was done by Herod. And Herod, as you know, became angry at John's message and had him beheaded. And the third thing is evil men and dictators. Herod was an evil man doing evil things to good people. In some of the countries where Christians live, they may be in what we call underground churches. A lot of times the dictator, and it can be a political or a political religious or political/religious dictator, wants there to be a certain religion in their country, so they despise Christianity, they arrest Christians, they torture Christians. And this happens in the country of the Great Red Dragon. I won't name it, but you know which one I'm talking about. Persecution with Christians. So, because evil men are in charge of world governments, and you can read about that in Luke 4 when Satan said to Jesus, the kingdoms of the world are given to me and I'll give them to whomsoever I will. How do you explain a Hitler coming to power? Well, it was demonic power. It's a long story behind that brought him to power. How do you explain some of these evil men in the Middle East that are killing people or in Asian countries? It's because of demonic powers that are behind them. And many times in the early church, in the Roman Empire, Nero was schizophrenic. He was absolutely demonic possessed, and he beheaded, burnt Christians on crosses, tortured Christians, fed them to the lions, because demon spirits were controlling him. So when evil men are in charge, bad things can happen to good people, including death, premature death. Number 4, this is one of the things he said that the Lord told him. He said, Walter, the earth is still under a curse. Now, because the earth is still under a curse, you have tsunamis, you have earthquakes, you have hurricanes, you have tornadoes, because in Revelation 12, Satan, the prince of the power of the air, Ephesians 2:2, controlled the weather elements to attack the woman who was Israel. And even in the wilderness where they hide out during the tribulation, we believe at Petra, the flash floods come through there often. It said a flood of water came to devour the woman, and God opened up the earth, which is probably a small earthquake, and the water went down into the earth, and that's going to happen in the future. So here's the 4 reasons that people can die before their appointed time. Number 1, demonic sickness where the demon is not dealt with. Number 2, people who do not do their job right, and it causes mechanical failure, car failure, engine failure, or whatever for an individual, and their life is taken. Number 3 is evil people being in charge that torture and kill good people. Terrorists, for example, would fall in that category. And number 4, because the earth is under a curse. Now, let me say this. God knows the future, and I'm going to tell a quick story here, and I'm going to be careful telling this, but many years ago, a friend of mine had a brother that drowned in a swimming pool, and they got his body out and tried to work on it and could not revive him. So a Hindu doctor who happened to be in the area came and worked on him, and this, I don't even know how long the kid was out. It may have been 45 minutes, maybe to an hour. So the doctor pronounced him dead. My friend Floyd Lahan was on the campground at that time. This is many, many years ago. And he said, the Lord told me something bad was going to happen to this family. And he turned to the doctor and he said, now, doctor, I know you're probably a good doctor, but God didn't bring you here to help this boy. God brought you here to see the glory of God. And making a long story short, the boy got raised back from the dead and is alive today. The situation, however, was this, that same young man has had difficulties and challenges his entire life and has spent a lot of his time in prison. And we were discussing one day about would it have been better for him to go to be with the Lord as a young child as to go in his life and struggle. That cannot be answered only except by the Lord himself. King Hezekiah was told he was going to die. He got well. The Babylonians visited him. He showed the Babylonian strangers all the vessels of the temple. And from that moment when the men got back to Babylon, they made plans to one day invade Jerusalem. And as Isaiah rebuked him for showing the temple secrets. And in that 15 years that God added to him is when Isaiah did something bad that later caused the Babylonian captivity. I think it was maybe 100 years later or more. So would it have been better for Hezekiah to go ahead and pass away than to be given the additional 15 years? And there again, only the Lord can answer that. Here's a note I made for those of you in answering this question: why does God allow some people to pass? Number one, people pass because it's simply their time. I didn't want him to go, you didn't want him to go, but for some reason that God saw into the future, it was better for them to come home and be with him. So sometimes it's just not the time. Number two, some pass away to prevent them from experiencing the evil that's coming, or down the road them falling into evil and dying lost. So that's the second reason. Number three, sometimes God takes them to prevent them from a future destruction that would happen to them. And as in the case of Lazarus, he died so that Christ could raise him, so that the glory of God will be manifest. You know, when my mother had what appeared to be a flu, and she stayed at home for 2 weeks trying to fight it by herself, and finally was tested for COVID, the last conversation I had with my mom, and I sort of feel bad about it because they kept telling her, you need to go to the doctor and get treatment. My wife was in the hospital 5 days, and they just basically treated her, and she prayed and she recovered from COVID. But my mother had had it so long, it had already gotten into her lungs and it was already affecting her. And I said, Mom, here's your choice. If you stay home, you will go to heaven. And if you go to the hospital, I don't know if you go to heaven from there or they can treat it, but it might be best to at least get treatment. Well, she went. She was there for a couple of weeks and she was recovering, and her heart failed her. We didn't know she had heart problems. Well, it was very sad for me, and I was there when my mother, in her final hours in the emergency room, they let me and Pam in and some of the members of the family, which this was during COVID, of course. And I had a hard time weeping over her for this reason. She lost my dad. She was a widow. Number two, she had difficulty paying the bills. And to be quite honest with you, my wife and I stepped in all the time to make sure she was taken care of, which is the thing we were required to do by the Word of God, and we wanted to do out of love. Number three, she had broken, listen to this, she fell in her 80s, broke her ankle and her wrist, was 10 weeks in the hospital, ended up driving and coming back to work. She was Italian. The doctor said in Chattanooga, I have never, ever in my life seen a woman as physically as strong that could take the pain your mother can in the history of me being a doctor in the hospitals. And I said, she's a stubborn Italian. She really was. I told Mama, you are the most stubborn woman I've ever met. Now, not bad. She's a godly woman, but I'm telling you, if she made up her mind on something, you're not going to change her mind. But I began to see her soul and spirit with the Lord in heaven, with Dad, her parents. And I realized she had a rough life. She had a tough life. I mean, especially when Dad passed away. Infirmities and just bills coming due. And I realized God took her to relieve her of the pain and the pressure that she was having on the earth. If she'd have lived, there was dental problems, there was so many physical issues that she felt like she was not having the quality of life. And my dad was the same way. When my dad was told that they were going to insert a feeding tube in him, he'd be fed by a feeding tube, he said, I'm not doing it. He said, I don't want anything to eat or drink. Actually, he couldn't swallow. He could chew on ice. Is that what he did? For 15 days, he ate nothing or drank nothing. And of course, his body eventually shut down. And I was with him right about the time it happened. And I went to get something at a store and came back, and he'd gone to be with the Lord. But Dad said to me, I can't see to read the Bible. I can't travel. I'm here kind of by myself. I'm not able to get out. And a lot of people, can't come and visit and so on. And he just said, I've had a great life and I'm ready. So please understand this. There are times that you have a mother and dad that's 70, 80, 85 years of age, and you want them around because you don't want to, you're going to miss them. But they may say to the Lord, I'm finished, I'm done, please allow me to go. And they will themselves to go. That's the fifth reason people go, because sometimes they go through so much pain and suffering, they will themselves to go, and they give up on the human life, but they go to accept the life ahead. Paul said in the book of, in the New Testament, he said, I would rather go be with the Lord. To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, but it is better for me to stay with you. Now in closing, you may not ever get an answer as to why someone has gone to be with the Lord until you get to heaven. And there's a lot of stories I can tell you about that. But one thing we all have to do is we have to trust God and know if they are believers. I always look like my dad and mom, like they've just taken a journey and I'm going to be joining them. Look at it that way. If they're with the Lord, they've taken a journey and you're going to go be with them either in the coming of the Lord or through death. So just don't be discouraged when people you love pass away. We don't understand it, but I can tell you this, if they could come back, they wouldn't do it. And you know they love you and you love them, but they never come back having been where they've been, into an earth that's cursed with pain, with demons and satanic powers and evil people. They wouldn't do it. And people that have had a life after death experiences and seen heaven talked about when the Lord told them to come back, how disappointed they were, but yet they were happy that they could fulfill the will of God in their life. So I don't know who this is for, but if it helps you to understand things, I want a thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. And I do need more of you to subscribe to the channel. There's no cost to do that. Hit subscribe, hit the bell. You'll get the notification when we're going to do more YouTube videos. And hopefully, if we get to go to Israel, and we plan on going to Israel, I'm going to do a lot of YouTube videos on location from places you've never seen before. So be looking for those in the future. We have a special offer coming up. And don't forget to join us in the meetings here in town, also the meetings that are planned in the future. I heard this many times on Saturday afternoon. I have never missed a main event in many years, and this week's services were the greatest revelation of God's Word yet. Personally, the morning services released the most profound, right now, practical series of revelations that I've actually ever heard in my 46 years of ministry. The 5 messages that I preached were all new insights, some I had never seen until recently, that were birthed in the secret place of prayer. I felt impressed to emphasize lessons on defeating the strange attacks of the enemy, and I included a significant prophetic update, also teaching on the meaning of the year 5783 and teaching the authority of the Holy Spirit in a believer's life. Here's the title of my 5 messages: The 5 Prophetic Omens Coming in 2023, The Prophetic Decree of the Watchers, The Satanic Ambush and the Spirit-Filled Edge, Recovering when Satan Chastises Your Peace, How to Issue a Restraining Order on the Enemy. Tony Scott taught a word that opened up a new spiritual level, and the title of the message was Living in the Highest Kingdom Life. Ron Carpenter brought the people to their feet with a powerful word, the legal side of prayer. Tommy Bates built our faith and just literally brought in the glory of the Lord with It's Time to Release the Supernatural. This main event series is a solid investment in your spiritual growth, explaining battle-proven tactics, and also increases your knowledge and provides faith-building truths that unlock the mysteries of the kingdom of God in the time of the end. There are 4 ways in which to order. Call toll-free 1-888-21-BREAD or call our Voice of Evangelism offices at 423-478-3456. Or you can order online at perrystone.org requesting the 2022 main event CDs or the DVDs. You can also mail in your order to Perry Stone, P.O. Box 3595, Cleveland, Tennessee 37320. Now always remember to request either 22ME CD for the CDs or 22ME DVD for the 8 DVDs. Some DVD messages also have various pictures and scriptures to enhance the meaning of the message so that you can see and hear the word of the Lord. Now the 8 CDs are $55, the 8 DVDs are $95, and we will pay the postage. If this year has been difficult, and you've been hit from different directions, I can assure you these messages will give you weapons for warfare, tools for living, encouragement in your spirit, and help build your faith. And they will help you to break the strongholds and oppression of the adversary. The prophetic update is also very powerful. Please order yours today and help keep Manifest on the air.
If you enjoyed this YouTube content, there's an important website you should know about: perrystone.org. Perrystone.org is an essential resource for the latest books, audiovisual presentations, and digital products from Perry Stone Ministries. Resources that cover the same kinds of topics discussed in the program you just watched. Stop in and see all that's available at perrystone.org.